Tēnā tātou, tēnei au e mihi ana ki a tātou, ko tai mai ki tēnei whakarewatanga o tēnei pūrongo. Nō reira ki ngā reo, ki ngā mana, ki ngā kārangaranga maha, kei wainganui e koutou, tātou, ki ngā maunga whakahi, ki ngā waka tapu, ki ngā wai tapu. Tēnei au e mihi ana ki a koutou katoa hei māngai motoropu nei. Welcome everybody to the launch of this this significant report. Just want to acknowledge all the connections amongst us that have gathered, those that are known, those that are unknown. We'd like to start this with a karakia, because from our worldview as Indigenous people of Aotearoa, we're not talking about numbers in a report. Each of those numbers represent a person from the divine, people are tapu. So these figures represent people that we've lost. With that in mind, we'd like to ensure that we begin this correctly in terms of te ao Māori tikanga and whakaaro. Would like to express that the report has a significant challenge in it, and that challenge is to the systems of the health system that have not necessarily significantly changed, so that especially for Māori and Pasifika, women and babies, statistics either stay the same or grow. This is not true for other areas. So I'd like to make the point that this is not about individuals, this is about systemic change. Nō reira. So with that, let's start with the karakia. Nō reira, unuhea, unuhea, unuhea te uru tapanui, kia wā te kia māma, te ngā kautahinengaro te wairua, ki te ara takatū. Whakairia ki runga e rungo, ai rā, ko wātea, rire, rire, pai mārire. Tēnā tātou.
Tēnā koutou katoa, welcome everyone. My name is John Tate. I'm an obstetrician and gynaecologist and chair of PMMRC. I would like to begin by acknowledging the mothers and babies, families and whānau that bear the grief of losing those loved ones whose lives and deaths are represented in the 14th PMMRC report. I would also like to take the opportunity to thank the committee, the working groups, the Secretariat, Joe, Sarah, Kirsty and Kiri, Gabriel and her Otago group, the epidemiologists, and particularly I would like to thank the local coordinators, without whom this report would not have been possible. So the first thing that we're going to present is an overview of the 14th report, which will be done by Dr. Rose Elder and Associate Professor Donna Cormack. Rose is an obstetrician and gynaecologist working at Kaplan Coast Health, clinical leaders of obstetrics, and has been a coordinator for PMMRC for several years. She's been a member of the committee since 2015 and is also a member of the Maternity Mortality Review Working Group. Associate Professor Donna Cormack has been a member of PMMRC since 2018, and she brings her expertise in Kapapa Māori, racism, ethnicity data, knowledge and expertise in data governance. She is a teacher and lecturer with joint positions at Otago and Auckland. So without any further ado, can we ask Rose to begin the brief overview of the 14th report?
Kia ora, ko Rose toku ingoa. My name's Rose Elder and I'm an obstetrician gynaecologist in Wellington, and I'm the Deputy Chair of the Perinatal and Maternal Mortality Review Committee. Today I'm going to give a brief overview of the PMMRC monitoring report, which outlines some of the trends in mortality and serious morbidity. The aim of our work is to monitor trends and look at systems issues that could be modified to prevent future deaths. Working together across the system towards zero preventable harms and death for all mothers and babies, families and whānau. This is our vision. But this is our 14th report, and you'll see that different parts of data have different timeframes attached to them, and you can see those listed there. And if you want any more information, there's a link at the bottom of that slide. At this stage, I'd like to acknowledge the system that's been set up and those that continue to work to develop it and support it. Mostly though, I would like to acknowledge women, babies, family and whānau who have shared their information. This is a very precious gift that women and babies, to women and babies of the future, and continues to be a great responsibility. In this slide, you'll see the perinatal mortality over the years since 2007. Statistically significant reduction in deaths, and this is good news, but we need to understand a little more. We need to look at different groupings of babies in this slide to understand it with more detail. In the next slide, you'll see the definition for the line at the top of the graph, which is the perinatal related mortality. And this is the overall deaths from babies after 20 weeks of gestation, and 400 grams if the gestation is not known, up until 28 days after birth. The next line down is the stillbirth rate, and this is fetal deaths after 20 weeks gestation up until birth, and it excludes terminations. The blue line is neonatal deaths, and this is after birth up to 28 days of age, and further can be defined into early and late. And the last red line is terminations, and this is interruption of pregnancy after 20 weeks gestation. In this slide here, you will see that there has been a significant reduction in the deaths overall in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And this includes overall perinatal deaths, but also stillbirths, especially in spontaneous preterm labour or rupture of membranes, and also intrapartum stillbirth in babies at term, which is after 37 weeks. There's been a drop in hypoxic peripartum deaths, so lack of oxygen around the time of birth, and rates of neonatal deaths for those born at or over 41 weeks has also had a reduction. The mortality rate of intrapartum stillbirth in babies at 23 to 27 weeks has also seen a reduction over this time. There has also been some evidence for a reduction in peripartum death from maternal hypertension and maternal conditions and other neonatal deaths without an obstetric antecedent. There has been a not statistically significant downward trend in maternal mortality. This is great news, and it encouraged me greatly that work being done in the sector to optimise care has been occurring. Education about side sleeping, smoking cessation, blood pressure management, monitoring growth, fetal movements, these have all been really positive things. But however, we need to ensure that all of the population is benefiting from these changes. And if we go to the next slide, you'll see that there is ongoing inequity, unfortunately. Perinatal deaths of Māori, Pacific, Indian and other Asian, Middle Eastern, Latin American and African ethnic groups are not decreasing. We need to progress the reduction in perinatal mortality and morbidity for population groups that are seeing an inequity in outcome. Specifically, stillbirth deaths in Pacific and Indian mothers and neonatal deaths in Maori Pacific Indian mothers is not seeing a reduction. If we go to the next slide, in this graph we can see that there are higher rates in some populations. In the next slide I've highlighted some areas specifically on this slide. So in stillbirths there is a higher rate, especially for the Indian Pacific, neonatal deaths in Maori and Pacific and Indian, and this is reflected in the overall perinatal related deaths. Stillbirth rates in mothers under 20 is approximately 1.5 times higher than mothers who are 20 years and over. This is shown in the next graph with a higher rate in the red here, which is the under 20-year-olds, and much higher overall perinatal related deaths, that is from the neonatal and stillbirth groups. Next slide. Also, mothers living in deprivation, which is quintile 5, are not seeing a fall in their perinatal deaths for their babies. They're more likely to lose their baby from stillbirth, neonatal death and perinatal related death overall, compared to those living in other quintiles. And you'll see that in this slide here with the slight light blue colour showing a increase in the rate that is statistically significant for these women. The next slide is slightly busy with lots of numbers and lots of things listed. It is explaining the perinatal deaths that are classified according to the Perinatal Society of Australia and New Zealand, which is known as PSANZ, as a death classification for babies and for perinatal and for neonatal deaths. And then in the next slide, it shows the most common cause of death is congenital anomaly, which accounts for about 26% of deaths. In the next slide, the second most common cause is around spontaneous preterm birth or labour or rupture of membranes. And this is around 16% of deaths. Around a quarter of stillbirths are classified as unknown or unexplained. And these are babies where there's been no medical or maternal or fetal reason for the death, and there's been no investigations as to the cause of death. And around 30% of babies had a post-mortem in 2018, and I think this is an area where we can improve knowledge for women going forward. On the next slide, I've expanded that last slide to show a classification of the hypoxic peripartum death rates by year. And it's shown a reduction over the period from 2007 to 2018 that has been statistically significant. However, when we look more closely at this decline, it is really driven by a drop in the rates for New Zealand European mothers. And in the next slide, we've shown babies known to have higher rates of NE include babies of mothers having their first baby, mothers living in quintiles 2 to 5, babies whose gestation is at 37 weeks or at 41 weeks, a birth weight of under 2,500 grams, babies who are small for gestational age, and also in multiple pregnancies from 37 weeks. In the next slide, we're going to move on to consider maternal death. And this is tragically happens to approximately 10 women each year. And I'd just like to reinforce that post-mortem does really help in improving understanding of maternal mortality. both for going forward, but also for the families involved. In this report, it is defined as women who die during pregnancy, and that's at any gestation, or they die 42 days after a pregnancy of any gestation. Again, we divide those into separate groups, and on the next slide we show that these can be divided into direct, indirect, unknown, or coincidental. In 2018, we had 10 maternal deaths, and that's not including the coincidental deaths. Over the whole time period from 2006 to 18, there were 68 direct deaths and 50 indirect maternal deaths. And we know that the risk of maternal death is increased at those over the age of 40 years of age. And we also know that the highest prioritised ethnic groups involved with perinatal, with maternal death are Māori and Pacific women, who have the highest rates at around 23 or 22 deaths per 100,000 maternities. So just going through the slide, direct deaths are related to obstetric events, indirect deaths are related to pre-existing conditions or conditions not related to obstetric events. The slide that's showing at the moment shows a comparison with the UK data on maternal deaths, and we use the United Kingdom because they have a comparable way of collecting information, so we think it's a good comparison. And this shows the indirect deaths, so that's either pre-existing conditions or conditions that occur during pregnancy that aren't obstetric conditions, so they might be cardiac or neurological or other infections such as appendicitis that wasn't related to an obstetric condition but was probably made worse by the pregnancy. And here you can see our rates are fairly similar with the UK data, although it does show that coincidental deaths are higher in New Zealand, and there were 68 direct maternal deaths in the time period from 2006 to 18. And over this time, we have changed our classification of where we put maternal suicide, and we've gone with aligning with the WHO, where it is put in the direct maternal deaths. And that is the one area where we show a significant difference from the UK data. It is the leading cause of maternal death in New Zealand is suicide, with 30 deaths in this time period. And that's 23% of our maternal mortality. Amniotic fluid embolism is the second most likely direct cause of death at 14 deaths. And when we compare to the UK data, we are significantly different, and Wahine Māori are statistically higher rates of maternal death due to suicide compared to New Zealand, European. And this is very disturbing. And the NHS, they have, in 2019, invested significantly in this area. So they have put £239 million into a 5-year project for specialist and community-based maternal and perinatal mental health services. In New Zealand, no government budget has been given specifically to reduce maternal suicide and deaths, and maternal wellbeing investment is limited. Yet again, Wahine Māori are overrepresented in deaths and are 3.35 times more likely to die by suicide than New Zealand European women. This is not okay. So now I'd like us to consider what can we do to address the perinatal and maternal mortality and morbidity in Aotearoa, New Zealand. PMMRC has continued to ask for bread and flour to be supplemented, as it is in many other countries. And this is to, because it has been shown to reduce the number of neural tube defects, which is a type of congenital anomaly. We also would ask district health boards and primary care providers to consider active navigational support to help women find and register with an LMC midwife or carer with minimal delay. And this means that they can achieve their early antenatal and antenatal care. This will mean that they have addressed any modifiable risk factors. They'll be supported with smoking cessation or with any health conditions that will need early diagnosis and intervention or treatment for things such as infections. On the next slide, you will see a diagram that is considering equity. I think it's important for every person and every leader of a system that we have a responsibility. Honouring the Treaty of Waitangi is a fundamental part of that. We need to provide culturally safe care. We need to ensure that Māori have an equal voice at the decision making, and I think this will improve the outcomes for all women. And this, as we've already talked about, active navigational support for women to get care, support of cultural and clinical needs, working together. And for all of this, we need an adequately resourced maternity sector. So our wero, or challenge to us all, is for us to work together to implement the PMMRC recommendations that have been put out there over the years. This needs urgent action, and it's centred around equity. And this is to reduce the perinatal mortality for those who are overrepresented in the deaths. And we've shown that we can decrease the deaths, so let's take on this challenge. Care must be delivered to meet the needs of women, and this is why we need to take responsibility to partner with women and co-design care models that will fit with their needs. Owning these responsibilities together, we can make the greatest and the most valuable impact towards changing the outcomes for women and their babies, families and whānau. Kia ora, ngā mihi. Thank you for your time watching this.
Before I reintroduce Donna, I would just like to remind everyone that there is a question and answer thread, and the question and answers will be available at the end of the presentations. So our next speaker is going to be Associate Professor Donna Cormack, who I have already introduced. Donna.
Kia ora, ko te mea tuatahi he mihi ki a rātou kua whitirangitia. Kia ora rātou whānau hoki, tēnei te mihi aroha ki a rātou. O te rā ki a tātou te hunga ora kia kohuhu mai a Ipurangi tēnei rā, tēnā no tātou katoa. He uri tēnei no kaitahu, no ka te mamoe ko Donna Cormack ahau. Kia ora, I'm Donna Cormack, and as John said earlier, I've been a member of PMMRC since 2018, and I am a researcher and teacher at Te Kupunga Hauora Māori at the University of Auckland and Te Rōpū Rangahau Hauora Irupo Māori at the University of Otago. I'm not going to speak for long, but I just wanted to add some brief thoughts to sit alongside the presentation that Rose has given, outlining the patterns and trends from this 14th report, and thinking back to Dennis's opening, always keeping in mind that the numbers in this report represent the lived experiences, the grief and loss of whānau. In particular, I want to make a few points about the persistent inequities that we see in these monitoring reports. And these inequities are an expression of broader structural inequities in our society. They represent the impacts of ongoing colonialism and racism as they play out through the differential distribution of communities to the conditions that are needed to be well and to the exposures and environments that are damaging to our health. As an example, the report highlights how deprivation is associated with a number of outcomes in this space. And this is a well-established area of public health knowledge. We also know that in Aotearoa New Zealand, deprivation is highly racialised. Māori, Pacific peoples and other groups marginalised in oppressive systems are much more likely to live in areas of high deprivation. So if we're truly committed to eliminating inequities, we also have to reckon honestly and urgently with our society's ongoing tolerance for inequity in life opportunities, resources and experiences. COVID-19 has shown us how quickly the government can move when it makes a decision to act. It can literally move overnight. So not moving urgently in these other areas to address poverty, adequate incomes, safe housing, are equally active decisions by the government agencies and other institutions. The inequities also represent the differential access to and quality of healthcare for Māori, which is well established and has recently been discussed comprehensively as part of the ongoing Waitangi Tribunal Māori Health Claim. Over the years, the PMMRC has made a number of recommendations and reports about ways in which the health system and health providers can work to improve care, to provide care that's clinically competent, that's appropriate, that's anti-racist, and that's culturally safe, and ultimately the work we can do to eliminate inequities. Our systems are complex and there's often multiple factors at play that contribute to health outcomes, but there are also simple everyday things that those of us in these systems can do to make change. Transformation needs to become a conscious everyday practice until we achieve the system that our tamariki and mokopuna deserve. We recognise there are many people working hard to achieve change in this space, and this includes the critical work of Māori providers and organisations, often in environments of unstable and short-term funding and contracting. We also know that change is possible, as we've seen in the report, with improvements that have taken place in some areas for some groups. For me, what's missing is the broader commitment to comprehensively supporting and resourcing what is necessary to achieve the best possible outcomes for all whānau and to avoid the tragedy and loss that these statistics represent, both in terms of transforming existing systems, but also where alternative services and responses self-determined by Māori should be operating and supported. Associate Professor Ruha Benjamin reminds us we need to imagine and craft the worlds we cannot live without, just as we dismantle the ones we cannot live within. The data and stories we hear in this committee, in this report and in the presentations today, these inequities speak to me of a world I cannot live within. It's not the world I envision for my mokopuna, and I don't believe it's the world our tupuna envision for us. So what I hope this work does, and the conversations and transformative actions that must follow, is move us closer to the world that our mokopuna deserve, where they are well as Māori and where we are all well. Nō reira I roto I tēnā whakaaro, he mihi aroha ki a koutou, mauri ora.
This year we have taken a very different approach to our report. We have commented for a number of years now that although the perinatal death rate is reducing, it is only reducing in one category, and that is New Zealand European. We've also made over 120 recommendations, and of those, only 50% have been fully implemented. So this year we decided not to make any recommendations, but to put a challenge out to the sector, to government, to DHBs, and to the Ministry of Health. We acknowledge the enormous work that has been done by the sector in trying to improve perinatal outcomes. But at the moment, the amount of work that's being done is not being shown in our outcomes. So we have written to the 5 different stakeholders with the specific recommendations for them. And we hope that this time something will happen so that we will have an equitable outcomes for our babies. Thank you.
So kia ora. I would just like to now introduce the next speakers. So first I want to introduce Raewyn Smith. Raewyn was born and raised in Palmerston North. Her parents are from Waiho Valley in Ōkaihau, Te Tai Tokerau, and they belong to the local marae Pikitiaroha and Parawhenua. Raewyn moved from Palmerston North to Te Tai Tokerau in 2000 and has worked in various roles in both addiction and mental health fields over the last 20 years. Her passion is in maternal and infant mental health and addiction services. She was team leader and part of the team that developed the parental and pregnancy service in Whangarei and Kaitaia. And over the past two and a half years, Raewyn has worked as a SUDI prevention coordinator in Te Tai Tokerau, and most recently has held the role of program leader for child health Ngā Tātai Ihorangi with the Planning and Development Office for the Northland District Health Board. Cassandra, the co-presenter for this presentation, was raised in Whangarei and her parents are from Kāmo and Hokianga. She returned to Te Tai Tokerau in 2004, and began her midwifery journey, eventually working as an independent midwife. She spent the past 8 years working with whānau and family start, antenatal education and hapu wānanga, and has been with the SUDI team for the past 2 years. And the presentation today is Ngā Wānanga o Hini Kōpū, and I'll hand over to you now, Raewyn. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Kia ora koutou. Ngā mihi nui, Dennis, mō tō karakia mō tēnei hui. Mō ngā mihi John, mō tō mihi mō tēnei kaupapa e tēnei rā. Te ahu te maunga o Māpiri e te roto, Hokianga te moana, mā tātua te waka, Ngāpui te iwi, te uritaniwha te hapu, Parawhenua te marae, ko Nick Smith, ho rangatira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. So yeah, hi, I'm Raewyn, and I'm a mother of four daughters and 5 mokopuna. And I also work at Northland Health and are part of the Hapu Wānanga team. Before I start, I just wanted to acknowledge in this space the creators of this wānanga, Koha Aprehama, Tash Whariro and Rachel Hetaraka, along with Pio Whairangi midwives. I also want to acknowledge Ngāti Hini Health Trust, Te Hā Oranga, Te Hikuha Ora, Hokianga Health and Northland District Health Board for enabling the spaces that we occupy for Te Wānanga o Hini Kōpū. I want to start off with this little tohu from Moy Milne in 2001. The gift that my ancestors and parents gave to me is the confidence in being Māori. So where does this journey begin? In 2009, we had a hapu ora wānanga running up in Kaitaia that was run by Colleen Brown. So in the mid-north, Wiki Davis and Crete Sherrington and Koha had a conversation, noticing that many of our Māori hapu mums weren't attending the local antenatal classes. They talked about the wānanga that was running up in Kaitaia and wanted to develop something similar in the mid-north. With that came the wānanga Te Mata o Mua. So this was more than 11 years ago. This wānanga was about improving health engagement with whānau Māori in the antenatal space. In 2016, Northland District Health Board engaged a review of Hapu Wānanga antenatal education programs being delivered in Te Tai Tokerau. The recommendation was a culturally specific targeted approach is needed to address the long-standing health inequities experienced by Māori women and their babies in Te Tai Tokerau. Identifying that Hapu Wānanga is an early intervention that has the potential to address long-standing lack of engagement and access to a group-based antenatal education that helps set up Māori women and whānau for better outcomes. At the time, there were around 20% Māori hapu mums who were attending antenatal classes, as opposed to non-Māori, which was sitting at around 68%. With this, the Northland District Health Board offered to roll out our Hapu Ora Wānanga across Te Tai Tokerau, and Te Wānanga o Hinikopu was created. Te Wānanga o Hinikopu is a co-design program that was designed with insights from whānau, the community and community agencies. The focus would be on hapu whānau rather than hapu mums. So mums, dads, grandparents, siblings, neighbours, anyone who is connected to this pepe and who will have a vested interest in their future were invited to come along. Oh, I just want to change the slide. Okay. He kāka no au I ruia mai I Rangiatia, celebrating you. We are all descendants from the divine universe. I celebrate in the uniqueness that is me. I celebrate in the uniqueness that is you. We use 6 po to share the story of creation. In this first part of the wānanga, we explore the intangible spaces of our pregnancies. We start with te kore, the growing consciousness and becoming aware of the pregnancy, acknowledging the past, affirming the present, the aspirations of the future. Hinikopu, our pregnant mums, and whānau are affirmed in their mana and begin to understand the importance of taking care of themselves. Our second po, te pō, the process of making informed decisions and the multiple dynamics of those decisions. Ngā hinikopu, our hapu mums, will celebrate being hapu. And our third po, te kōpipiri, awareness of the senses, self-care with the potential realisation and long-term impact on hapu mama and pepe. Our hinikopu will recognise the significance of parents and whānau in the growth and the development of our pepe. Ka puta ora ia ngā hua. Every pregnancy is a new pregnancy. Take care of yourself and be present in the moment. This is the most important role you will have in your lifetime. This is your chance to help in the creation of a miracle. Our next 3 po. He whaiao, the transition from one space to another, from haputanga to birth, from the intangible to the tangible, and the journey. Hinikopu will know how to prepare their tinana, hininaro and wairua for birth. Te ao marama, the time of celebration and reflection, reclaiming and incorporating Māori traditional birthing practices. Hinikopu will confidently take ownership of their tinana during birth and develop knowledge of traditional and Māori birthing practices. Te hei wā Māori ora. Nurture and take care of taonga tuku iho. Understanding the importance of te piringa poho, the protective factors following the birth. Hini kōpū and whānau will understand the significance of te piringa poho. These are our guiding po that we use in our wānanga. And the journey is told and retold in every wānanga as we share these po with whānau. The conversations are reciprocal ones in which the whānau participate in exploring these po and what they mean for them. Ngā wānanga o Hini Kōpū provides an opportunity to deliver antenatal knowledge in a Māori-centric framework. The approach draws on mātauranga Māori as the validation and infrastructure of the practice, creating and empowering an incredible journey for whānau. Wānanga is about the sharing and collaboration of thoughts, ideas and traditional whānau birthing practices. Conversations with whānau encouraged to discover their nurturing stories and to celebrate these rich traditions. At this time, we celebrate all who have chosen to engage in wānanga, and we treat our whānau like they are the taonga that they are. The wānanga itself is run in over 2 days. It's an interactive space where we create a pū whenua, we decorate baby bodysuits, all while putting loving thoughts and aspirations into the mahi that we do. The recognition that women are cared for means whānau will thrive. Positive strength-based aspirational kōrero and empowerment. We have presenters that attend that will speak on different topics: safe sleep, healthy housing, smoke-free, and presenters are chosen for their ability to frame positive messages. The dream for the wānanga is that, and it is in the process across Northland, and that the wānanga will be owned by the communities that it is presented in. We have our Pautuara team, who are people in the local areas who champion and help facilitate these wānanga. Some of the feedback that we've received about the wānanga that we have held, many whānau speak of the safe spaces to share. All of the whānau enjoy that they can bring their partners, their grandparents, their friends along to participate in the wānanga with them. The story is the star and it resonates with the whānau. What we've found when we share the story of creation, that this does resonate with people, with whānau, and they enjoy participating in the creation of actually their own story, their story of creation. Whānau feel like they belong in this space. They like that their tamariki are welcome. And many say we need more wānanga like this. In 2020, we held 17 wānanga across Northland. We had 3 of our wānanga cancelled due to the COVID experience. We had 107 hapu mama attend our wānanga. 41 of these were our mums with in their first pregnancy, they're expecting their first baby. 66 were mama who were expecting their second or ongoing other pregnancies from there. We had 27 whānau who came back to wānanga who had been to previous wānanga. 83 support people. We had 19 non-Māori hapu whānau attend and 88 Māori whānau attend. In 2020, we are having our program evaluated and we're looking forward to those outcomes. So one of the things that we thought about with Te Wānanga o Hine Kōpū was how could we transfer the outcomes that we could see from the wānanga into the child health space. Ngā tātai ihorangi, our intentional approach and equity response to improve the health for tamariki Māori. This was initially the first 2,000 days program, and then it was rebranded as Ngā Tātai Ihorangi. Tātai is the tool Māori use to arrange information into sequential order. It describes the relationship from one to another and is used to demonstrate the relational connection of components. Ihorangi are the finite details which make up the bigger picture and contributes to the whole. Ngā wānanga o Hine Kōpū is a component of Ngā Tātai Ihorangi. So in the Ngā Tātai space, we do a lot of work across the child health sector and working on improving our relationships with each other, service to service, and also working on areas where we haven't inspired whānau to come to our services. So we've changed things up. We don't have DNAs, we have DNIs, failed to, we did not inspire. And we've changed the way that we manaaki. We talk a lot about how we host whānau in our services. If our whānau aren't coming, what is it that we're not getting right? The learnings gained in Ngā Wānanga o Hine Kōpū contribute to the overall vision. Kia tupu ora ia ngā uri whakatupu, that the generations yet to come will grow and flourish. Hapu māma need to be nurtured and cared for as they are the keepers of the ira tangata. Investing in hapu māma ensures the secure, safe passage of the seed to the fulfillment of the dreams and aspirations of whānau. So what do we need to transform our learning spaces? Courage and commitment. The fusion of clinical and cultural practice is best practice. Having confidence that ngā mea Māori does make a difference. Confidence in competence is essential. We know what our oranga looks like. Transformation must happen to improve Māori health. When you know better, we must do better. And just to finish off, I'd like to share this little waiata with you all. Kia ora.
This one's coming out to ya. This will be the new buzz. Everybody show love and give it up, for our moms are the future, and nobody can take that away from ya. What should you do? Don't be scared to ask if you need some questions answered. Sometimes we need to better understand, no matter what you do, know that your tupuna chose you. Tane, we got to step the game up, supporting our wahine with some positive change. We gotta give to our women, we gotta love our women, and our mothers and fathers. We gotta teach our women to be the best that they can possibly be. Remembering whānau begins with whakapapa, you see. All I see through their eyes, and it's no surprise. Tihe mauri ora mums, you hold the essence alive. Hey. We can see into our future through our children's eyes. See you are a woman. That's all. And with the power of our people, we can make the change to take back our lives. This one dedicated to
to every single lady looking after babies. Dan, you done saved me. Single or you're married in relationship. Appreciation should be coming your way, and that is it. Why he net tall girls run the world, yeah, Beyonce said it. And if your boy ain't with it, better get him with it. They say a man loves a woman like he loves his mom, and my heart's filled with love. Thank you, Mom. See, I remember listening to Robert Nesta Marley sing, the biggest man that you ever did see. I was once a baby, and all our babies stem from our ladies. Baby girl, if you're going through it now and there's doubt in your mind, remember that giving birth is the gift of a lifetime. Gift heaven sent, it's a gift and it's true. Stand up, be proud, girl, we standing with you. Hey.
We can see into our future through our children's eyes.
See you are the woman, that's all.
And with the power of our people, we can make the change to take back our lives. Take back our lives.
Cause you are a woman, that's all you need. Hey, sing it again. You are a woman, that's all you need.
Kia ora, Raymond. What a fantastic presentation. Thank you so much. Our next presentation is on maternal mental health, and that's being presented by Christine Mello. Christine's a midwife at Auckland District Health Board. She works as an Associate Director of Midwifery, where a particular focus is supporting opportunities for psychological birth. She is also a Doctor of Health Science student at AUT University, and as part of her master's degree, she undertook research exploring midwives' perspectives of maternal mental health and the assessment of maternal mental health during pregnancy. Christine.
Hi everyone, I'm Christine Meller. Thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to talk about this really important aspect of care. I'm a midwife. I've got a real interest in this area, and I did some research for my Master of Health Science around midwives' perspectives of mental health and assessment during the antenatal period. So it's great to be involved in this webinar doing things differently. So it's really important to consider what constitutes risk in relation to maternal mental health, alongside assessment, screening, and services that are provided in order to mitigate this risk. Are we getting it right? The evidence suggests that it's not just the more serious mental health needs that could represent risk for the woman and the baby. It's long been considered whether a woman's emotional well-being can impact on her pregnancy. We now have a body of evidence to suggest that it can, that there's a clear psychological, physiological link, and that ripple effects of psychosocial stress can extend well beyond the postnatal period. Suicide is the leading cause of maternal death in New Zealand and particularly affects Maori. Maori women are over 3 times more likely than European women to die by suicide. For the period 2006 to 2018, suicide accounted for 30 deaths, that's 24% of the total. And almost half of these women, 41%, died by suicide during their pregnancy. And most of them died before 20 weeks gestation. Of the women that died, nearly half of them were known to be exposed to significant stressors and had engaged in self-harm or attempted suicide during their pregnancy. Maternal deaths by suicide in New Zealand are significantly higher than in the UK. We've got a figure here from the 14th report, the PMMRC 14th report, and it shows just left of the centre the maternal mortality ratios from suicide in New Zealand and in the UK. New Zealand shown in red and the UK in grey. So as you can see, it's a significant difference. Now, the UK has reduced suicide rates by investing significant funding in both primary and secondary level services for improving maternal and perinatal mental health. So back to New Zealand's. Barriers to accessing or engaging with care are the most common contributing factors to maternal death in the perinatal period. And inequities of care, access to care continue, remembering that Māori women are over 3 times more likely to die in the perinatal period by suicide. And the Maternal Mortality Review Working Group has recommended that the Ministry of Health makes targeted investment in maternal mental health services a key priority. Einstein reminds us that in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity, and we know that we've got an opportunity here for improvement. Some of these maternal deaths by suicide may have been prevented with timely identification of risk and available and accessible services. This needs to be a priority. The Centre for Mental Health in the UK calculated that the costs incurred as a result of perinatal mental health problems in the UK are huge, and they equate to 5 times the cost of improving the services. They estimated that 28% of these costs relate to the mother and 72% to the child. And it was also recognised that the potential impact of untreated perinatal mental health needs swell out even more extensively. For example, partners, employers, children being taken into care. So investing in the services is also cost effective. The antenatal period is an important opportunity to reduce mortality and morbidity. Historically, the main focus of maternal mental health assessment has been the postnatal period, but the importance of needs also being identified and supported antenatally is increasingly being recognised. Routine screening is recommended antenatally and postnatally. And this is important considering that rates of perinatal depression are actually highest during pregnancy. The Growing Up in New Zealand study, 2017, showed that 16.5% of the cohort of women, which was over 5,000, had significant symptoms of depression, either at booking or at 9 months postpartum. And more of these women met the criteria for depression antenatally. Also, women with antenatal depression are more likely to also be depressed in the postnatal period. Antenatal stress, anxiety and depression are risk factors for preterm birth and also low birth weight infants. So it's not just the more serious mental health problems that represent a risk. High levels of antenatal psychosocial stress are associated with negative effects on the cognitive development of the child. And they're also associated with childhood diseases such as infections, abdominal pain, mental health and behavioural problems. Some studies have found that high levels of antenatal psychosocial stress result in the child themselves being more likely to be depressed in adulthood. So this evidence really highlights some of the significant ripple effects if the woman's needs are not identified and are left unmet. I conducted a research study as part of my Master of Health Science degree, which explored how midwives perceived maternal mental health and how they assessed for risk antenatally. If routine screening was to be a recommendation, it's important to understand how midwives feel in this space. And it was published in 2019. I've been asked to talk about some of the key findings, so I'll briefly outline them. This was a qualitative descriptive study with 27 fantastic LMC midwife participants in the Auckland region. 5 focus groups were conducted with midwives in their LMC groups. And the overarching statement is holding the problem, plugging the gap between women and the service. In a nutshell, midwives were left plugging the unfilled gap when they identified maternal mental health needs, but could not access support for the woman if it was needed. The disparity related mostly to women with mild to moderate needs, such as anxiety or mild or moderate depression. And I say mild or moderate really loosely because I'm sure it doesn't feel mild or moderate to the woman, but it's just how it's classified. There is evidently a gap here. These women did not meet the referral criteria for the DHB mental health service, and primary services are often lacking. Midwives were then left carrying this weight. In contrast, midwives found that when women had more serious mental health needs, they were able to access services, and as their needs were then met, this had less impact on the midwife. The midwives absolutely acknowledged their pivotal role in identifying mental health needs and felt that the current service availability was not actually meeting the needs of all women, particularly in the primary space, nor was it meeting the needs of the midwives. The research results showed that when women who had symptoms of anxiety could not access appropriate services, this equated to a greater workload, stress, and pressure for the midwives. For example, longer appointments were needed, lots of emotional support and reassurance, and women sending lots of texts with their concerns at all times of the day and night. And although a degree of anxiety is normal, the midwives felt that the prevalence of heightened anxiety symptoms was really high. In fact, they were really concerned that actually this could become normalized because it was so prevalent. They found it difficult at times to identify the point at which it constituted risk for the woman and the baby. So identify needs in the absence of appropriate services, because things would be very different if there were appropriate services. Results showed that the midwives did some form of ongoing inquiry about the woman's mental health, but screening using a tool at this time was not routinely done during the antenatal period. The Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale was used more to validate midwives' concerns when they were making a referral. The midwives felt that maternal mental health screening was not purposeful in the absence of available services. Without this provision, midwives knew that once a concern was identified, it would equate to additional responsibility and stress for the midwife. The lack of services could be a barrier to effective screening. It needs to be efficacious and feel purposeful. In spite of sometimes identifying needs and being unable to access services, the midwives need to continue to keep the woman safe. They then felt that they were left carrying the weight of the woman's mental health needs without a safety net, and this weight could feel really heavy. They faced an additional responsibility beyond their midwifery obligations and worried about poor outcomes when they had to plug this gap between women and the service. They also felt that the trusting relationship between the midwife and the woman could be friend and foe, because it facilitated effective mental health assessment, but then also intensified the woman's expectations of support from the midwife. Sometimes maternal mental health needs, particularly anxiety, represented a variable for midwifery decision making. And this was usually with midwives arranging additional assessment, screening and intervention that may not have been clinically indicated, but it was purely to satisfy the woman's increased need for reassurance due to the anxiety. Midwifery boundaries were sometimes breached in order to keep the woman safe when appropriate services were not available. The midwives did not want to step over that fence. They're not mental health professionals. They wanted the woman's mental health needs to be met by services. Here are some key messages. Untreated and unsupported maternal mental health needs equate to risk. Maternal mental health needs are not always recognised. We need universal, routine antenatal and postnatal screening and clear referral pathways to guide routine screening and referral to services. All DHBs should now have maternal mental health referral pathways in place. Mental health needs to be normalised and integrated and synthesised into routine antenatal and postnatal care. It shouldn't be a separate entity. Assessment and screening needs to be understood by practitioners to be meaningful and efficacious by resulting in access to services if this is needed. Services must be available, accessible and equitable to meet the needs of all women, including those with anxiety and mild or moderate depression. Maternal mental health teams should take direct referrals from midwives, and this currently doesn't happen in all DHBs. And there's an urgent need for investment in maternal and infant mental health in New Zealand. The ripple effects of unmet needs are extensive and they could be intergenerational. Maternal mental health, it really matters, and it sits centrally to the health and well-being of the woman, her baby and the family. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Christine, for a very provocative and meaningful talk. The next talk is on neonatal encephalopathy, and that's going to be presented by Robin Cronin. Robin is a midwife who works both clinically and in the research midwife specialist role at Middlemore Hospital. She has a PhD from the University of Auckland on modifiable risk factors for late stillbirth. And she has been part of PMMIC since 2017 and also sits on as a member on the Neonatal Encephalopathy Working Group since 2018, providing a key link between PMMRC and the Neonatal Encephalopathy Working Group. Robin.
Hi, I'm Robin Cronin. I'm a research midwife specialist and clinical midwife at Counties Manukau Health. And over the next 10 minutes, I'm going to be talking about neonatal encephalopathy, focusing on recognition, communication, and cooling, which I hope will make sense by the end of this presentation. Now, neonatal encephalopathy, or NE, is a syndrome of disturbed brain function in the first week after birth in the term or near-term baby. And these babies have difficulty establishing and maintaining breathing, poor tone and reflexes, reduced consciousness, and often seizures. Now, NE is an umbrella term used in preference to hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy or birth asphyxia, because it's now recognised that acute and chronic causes are often in combination, such as fetal distress in labour with a small for gestational age baby. And the main cause of NE is decreased blood flow and oxygen to the baby's brain. And of babies with severe NE, at least 60% will die, and at least 25% of survivors will have lifelong complications from brain injury, including cerebral palsy, intellectual disability, blindness and hearing deficits, and epilepsy. Now, the severity of NE is measured using the simplified SANET criteria, and that's a tool to assess NE when there are predisposing risk factors. Now, I'm not going to be quizzing you on this at the end, but it's helpful to know about it. So mild NE are those hyper-alert babies, and it was previously thought these babies recovered within 24 hours, but recent evidence is that infants with mild NE have worse neurodevelopmental outcomes compared to those without. And moderate NE, if left untreated, only 50% of these babies will be neurologically normal at discharge on physical examination and MRI. In severe NE, up to 60% will die, and of the survivors, only 16% will be neurologically normal at discharge. Now, even the most unobservant midwife or doctor are unlikely to miss the comatose flaccid baby with severe NE, but it can be more challenging to recognise babies with mild or especially with moderate NE. Now, data collected by the PMMRC shows that the current New Zealand rate of moderate to severe NE is 1.2 babies per 1,000 live births, and that's comparable to other similar high-income countries. And that actually doesn't sound much, but between 2010 and 2018, 620 babies were born in New Zealand, and that's around 67 babies per year that were diagnosed with moderate or severe NE. And the rates haven't changed significantly in the past 8 years, but you can see there is an encouragingly downward trend, and it looks like we're starting to make a difference. Now, antenatal risk factors for NE are your usual suspects, including obesity, with rates of NE in New Zealand significantly higher in babies of women with BMI at or over 35. And small for gestational age babies are nearly twice as likely to be diagnosed with moderate and severe NE compared to appropriate for gestational age babies. And therefore, the reason for ACC funding the rollout of the Growth Assessment Protocol, or GAP, in our district health boards. And there are significantly higher rates of NE for primates compared to multiples. Now, labour and birth risk factors, or the things that keep me awake at night after a shift in birthing, are the sentinel events in a previously healthy baby resulting in birth asphyxia. And that can be seen in approximately 1/4 of babies with NE in New Zealand in the past 8 years of data collection, including abruption, shoulder dystocia, cord prolapse, breach, uterine rupture, and other causes including infection, and our old nemesis, the ominous CTG. However, we also know that an abnormal CTG has a high false positive rate, and the vast majority of babies born after an abnormal CTG are just fine. And a New Zealand 2020 study of CTGs from 35 babies with NE and 105 healthy babies reported that obstetricians and midwives who were not told which CTGs belonged to which babies detected 3/4 of babies with NE based on their CTG and recommended immediate action or delivery for more than 40%, which is good news. But it also means that some babies with birth asphyxia who developed NE went undetected. So the message is, even if the fetal heart or the CTG appears reassuring in labour, please stay alert for signs of NE in all babies. Now, the good news is that we do have additional ways of recognising babies at risk of developing NE. Of the babies with moderate and severe NE in New Zealand since 2010, we know that the majority required resuscitation at birth, ranging from oxygen to cardiac massage and adrenaline. Most had poor APGAR scores at 1 minute, and 77% had an APGAR below 7 at 5 minutes. And nearly 2/3 had abnormal blood gases. And it's important to note that 15% of babies with NE had normal blood gases. And recent evidence is that if the cord is compressed, for example, with shoulder dystocia, cord gases may be falsely reassuring because they show the baby's condition before cord compression. So that's an important thing to remember. Now, the newborn observation chart or newborn early warning score also supports recognition of NE. A 2018 audit showed that more than 40% of babies with fetal distress in labour had a new score of 2 or more postnatally. So please do the news. Now, whole body cooling of the baby is the only available treatment for NE. And the reason we cool babies with NE is because of the protective effects of cooling, which include that less babies with NE die or survive with major disability if they are cooled, less survive with cerebral palsy, and cooled babies with NE have improved cognitive and motor outcomes. But to be effective, cooling must commence within 6 hours of birth, the 6-hour window of opportunity. And the photo is of baby Sarah on her first day of life. She's undergoing passive cooling for NE. She's naked under the radiant warmer, but with the heater off to keep her rectal temperature between 34 and 33 degrees for 72 hours. However, we also know that identifying a baby with NE is not always easy. But the good news is that midwives are well placed to recognise the signs of NE because a midwife is present at every birth. And what we can do is first recognise the baby who is at risk of NE, which is any baby that is stunned or flat at birth requiring resuscitation, especially prolonged resuscitation, low APGAR scores, and a baby that is not behaving in the expected way. This baby might be hyper alert or lethargic with normal or poor tone or a weak or absent suck. So please take cord gases and lactate wherever possible and consider sending the placenta to histology so they can assess for infection, placental abnormalities and malperfusion. The second thing we can do as midwives is communicate with a colleague or a senior member of staff. and escalate and refer as soon as possible to a neonatal nurse practitioner or neonatal doctor at a tertiary hospital, using a tool like my old friend the SBAR, Situation, Background, Assessment, Recommendation, so that the person you are phoning understands why you are concerned and what you are asking them to do. The third thing we can do is call the baby if or when we are advised. Don't delay. Optimum calling to reduce brain damage starts within 6 hours of birth. Our aim is to increase the proportion of babies with NE who are recognised, referred and called, so that we have more babies like Sarah, who had no signs of brain injury when she was discharged home with her family. So please remember, recognise, communicate and call. You can make a difference. Thank you very much.
This scenario is to highlight the elements of Robin Cronin's presentation on how to recognise neonatal encephalopathy. It's a discussion between the shift coordinator on a tertiary unit and an LMC midwife. Juliet, have you got a minute?
I have. Come on, Julie.
Yes, I'd like to talk something through and get to your advice.
How are you doing? You've been here all night.
Yeah, but
be ready to go home?
Get ready to go home,
Yeah.
and the baby's been born, but I just have a few
Yeah.
concerns about the baby.
Okay.
So 37 weeks,
Yeah.
and born after, you know, not a long labour, meconium lyquor and fetal distress, so
Right.
born by ventouse.
Yeah.
Yep. And the baby's coming up 2 hours old now.
Mhm.
And I'm just a bit concerned about the tone.
Right. What were the outcomes?
So APGARs were 4, 7 and 9. And so the baby made a reasonable response, needed resuscitation. And so ventilation and CPAP
Yeah.
was kind of a sluggish response.
Right.
But got there, the neonatal nurse practitioner was there. She also assessed the baby, and the plan is for the neonatal team to do an assessment later today.
Right. So they do lactate, presumably.
Yep, but unfortunately it was a very skinny cord, and we couldn't get any cord blood, so they're haven't been done. And the baby's smaller than we expected on
Right.
the 8th percentile.
Okay.
So we certainly tried feeding the baby. Looked like it could be interested in feeding. Went to the breast, but just not sucking.
Right.
So we've expressed some breast milk, given the colostrum, and blood sugar following that is only just in normal range.
But you're saying the tone is not good.
Yeah, I just feel like the tone is getting worse, if not better.
Mm.
So, and I've done a news. So the news is 2 because the tone's
Yeah.
poor, and if I add in the feeding, it's 3.
Right.
I just don't want to escalate this unnecessarily. Like everything else about the baby looks okay, but and the parents have had a really, you know, it's been a difficult time adjusting to what's happened. I know the neonatal unit is really busy. Like there's been a couple of sets of twins born today,
Right.
and so I know there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, I don't think your concern is unwarranted. I mean, I think this baby is 2 hours old.
Yeah.
Is definitely sounds like its tone's not as good.
Yeah.
The news isn't good.
Yeah.
We don't have a lactate to work on.
Yeah.
There's, I mean, everything in this picture
Mm.
indicates that this baby needs to be seen by the neonatal team again.
Yeah.
And we need to think about whether they wanted to introduce cooling, which is, you know, within a certain time frame. Time is of the essence, really.
Mm.
So certainly I'd be recommending that you make contact with the neonatal team again and get them to come and review this baby as soon as possible.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you. That was my thought.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's yeah, I'll give the registrar.
I'll do that now.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
do that now.
All right,
Great.
I'm just going to head off to handover. I'll leave you in my office.
Wonderful. Thank you. Is that the neonatal registrar? Hi, it's Julie Richards here, LNC midwife. I'm in room 3 on the birthing unit. The situation I have is that I have a baby in my care who I'm concerned about. He's 37 weeks with increasing poor tone and not sucking. He's on the 8th percentile and he's got a NEWS of 3. His background is that he was born via ventouse following fetal distress with meconium lyquor. APGARs 4, 7 and 9 needing resuscitation with ventilation and CPAP at birth. My assessment is that he may be developing NE, and I would really appreciate an urgent assessment of him. Is that possible? Great. All right. I'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin, and your team for another very educational presentation. Our final presentation is going to be on the National Bereavement Care Pathway. Lisa Paraku and Vicky Culling are doing the presentation. Lisa's been a member of PMMRC since 2017, and she stands on behalf of bereaved families and whānau to bring a voice to spaces that are typically data-driven. Lisa is a friend of SANS, a peer-to-peer bereaved parent support network. Her daughter, Jasmine Lee, brings along with her 5 siblings who did not enter the world of light, bring her to this important work. Vicky is a bereaved parent experiencing the stillbirth of her first daughter over 20 years ago. She's been actively involved in SANS New Zealand for over 17 years, and she was a committee member of PMMRC from 2005 to 2011, and she is currently Vice Chair of the National Perinatal Pathology Service Clinical Network. Thank you, Lisa and Vicky.
Kia ora. Dennis Grinnell has opened our webinar with karakia. Lisa and I would also like to offer this karakia as bereaved mama, thinking about our babies and all of the babies that the PMMRC acknowledges. Kia hoki ngā whakaro kia rātou, kua whetū rangitia, oki oki atu koutou, moi mai rā. Tātou, ngā waihotanga o rātou mā, ngā mihi nui.
Kia ora Vicky, kia ora tātou, he whakapākia tēnei. May we remember those who have passed away and wish them well on their journey. For those of us here today, e mihi ana ki a koutou katoa, greetings to you all. Kia ora.
Ko Vicky Culling taku ingoa no Ōtepoti ahau, kei te Porirua ahau, e noho ana. Ko manuhira kia tōku whenua Taurikura. So greetings, my name is Vicky Culling. I hail from Te Waipounamu, the South Islander. I am a mainlander and I live in Porirua, Wellington region, and I am a trainer and educator in the area of perinatal and infant loss. Kia ora.
Ai rā, e aku nui, e aku rahi, tēnā rā koutou katoa, special greetings to you all. Ko waio, who am I? E te tātuku māma he urio no Airana. My mama is from Ireland. I te tātuku pāpa he urio no Parihauraki. My father hails from the beautiful Coromandel. Ko Lisa Paraku, tōku ingoa. My daughter, Jasmine, brings me here today. She was born beautiful and still in 2006, and she rests with her tupuna of Ngāti Tūwharetoa. Her 5 siblings also didn't enter the world of light, and so I do this mahi for them, and I do this mahi for my 2 boys who did. Kia ora rā.
Kia ora, Lisa. So in 2019, the PMMRC made a recommendation that the Ministry of Health should resource, support and facilitate the development of a national perinatal bereavement pathway with key stakeholders, including governmental and non-governmental organisations, to ensure high quality, appropriate and equitable care for all. And in this brief kōrero today, we want to imagine what a national perinatal bereavement pathway might look like.
Ai rā. So I sit on the PMMRC. I think I'm a consumer advocate. I think that's the title. So I sit here on behalf of the experience that me and my whānau have had with the system, and also Vicky and I are lucky enough to have sat with and been part of kōrero amongst bereaved parents. Okay. So when we have lost our precious babies, We have experienced quite variable levels of care. So out of that, and also what the data is showing us, came this recommendation. We've had lots of kōrero about this, hey, Vicky, about what it might look like. In 2017, we were doing some mahi around autopsy and post-mortem for families in whānau. And at that time, we asked the local coordinators up and down the motu within DHB, we sent out a survey. And in that survey, we were just asking about the levels of care that are provided for our families in whānau, for our bereaved families in whānau at that time. And what came back was variable. And in my experience, you know, with my 6 pepe, it has been variable. Variable based on where we are, where we live, variable based on its applicability to the way we live. So there's lots of variation in the care. That's not to say that our health professionals don't do the best that they can, because none of us come to this mahi, hey, wanting to do anything less than an optimal job. Engari, we don't know everything, so we do the best that we can within the resources that we have in our area at the time, and that showed up in the survey. So what was on offer for our families in whānau. And I think, Vicky, you might want to talk to the kōrero that we have nationally with SANZ, maybe share some views on that before we get into specifics.
Yeah, and another source of data is a survey that SANZ New Zealand did in 2019 when Internal Affairs was setting up the excellent website Whetū Rangitia with information for bereaved parents, families and whānau. And so SANZ New Zealand surveyed bereaved parents around the country, asking what sort of support they got and what support they would have liked. And that painted a picture of really variable and very different levels of support and information for families. And while we didn't identify who answered the survey, some talked about whether they were rural or urban and what part of the country they were in. And it was eye-opening, and it was really upsetting actually to think that you know, depending on where you live, dictates whether or not you have people looking after you who are confident and informed and know, have had the training, and whether there's a support group or a non-profit group in your area that provides things, you know, memory items to the hospital. So when we talk at a national level on our online meetings, you know, some people will talk about the wonderful things they got and the wonderful care they had, and others will, you can see it in their faces, like, oh, that's whereabouts were you? I didn't, that was never offered to me. And so this whole idea of a national bereavement or perinatal bereavement care pathway isn't about necessarily offering the same thing to everyone all the time, but it's ensuring that we care enough about our parents around the country to offer at least some minimum, have some minimum standards that we can achieve. And in a country this size, Lisa and I are pretty confident that it's something we can do. Yeah.
So some of the things that we've spoken of, and we spoke of at that time too, were the things that could be put in place that would really help, us in our most, you know, raw time of grief. And I guess from my perspective, culturally, there were a few things that need improvement, I guess. And it would be wonderful if we could have similar, you know, a guidelines and a framework that was offered up and down the motu. So there is access to the same things. That would be wonderful as a start. And then as communities, and personally what we individually need whilst we're in our grief, but when we are in that raw place with our precious babies and our whānau and families, that could make it a little more gentle for us during that time. And I know in my culture we call that whānau pani. We call that, all of the aroha is faced towards those who are in that raw grief at the time. That really helps. So I'd really love if we could standardize our pathway, because we don't seem to have any pathway. So maybe, at a really high level, make that available to everyone, so it's not based on where we live, or if we just happen to be in the right place, where we have people like SANZ and Baby Loss groups and volunteers who come in, and we're lucky because we have them and the information, but actually that is available up and down the motu to our families and whānau at the time. That would be really lovely. And I guess to give you examples of some of the things, culturally, in my culture, there's a real difference between tapu and noa, and those spaces are really quite different, and not everywhere can we have the ability to keep safe in the tapu space, where we have a matia, we have a loss. And we're not in the same spaces as that beautiful noa, where we also have celebration over here for new life that is coming in. So, and I don't think that is the same up and down. So a place for us to karakia, a place for us to mourn and grieve. All of these things, these are examples of things we can consider within. The tapu noa, I had experiences like my baby being referred to as products of conception, so changing our language. Yes, it's technically true, but that's my baby. And actually right from conception, and that's just my personal experience, because others have a different experience, but my personal one was right from conception. That was my baby. And so when we refer to my baby as products of conception to be picked up in an orderly office whilst they're eating their lunch, which was just one of my many experiences, that tapu noa is not catered for, and we're unsafe in it. So I guess from my perspective, a standard bereavement care pathway would make allowances for families to be able to choose the level of support and care that they have during that time. So that's what I'm excited about anyway. Kia ora, Vicky.
Yeah, and it would offer staff, our professionals, some safety and confidence as well. So our goal in this is not just focused on our bereaved whānau, it's actually the whole, everyone involved in this work. And I just want to talk about somewhere where it's already happening, and that's in the UK. So in 2017, the UK developed and launched the National Bereavement Care Pathway for Pregnancy and Baby Loss. And the impetus was to increase the quality of and reduce the inequity of bereavement care. So they have a set of 9 bereavement care standards that they have developed in conjunction with professionals and baby loss organisations. So they're standards or guidelines that guide everyone working in that area. And then they have 5 pathways that cover miscarriage, and that includes molar and ectopic pregnancy, termination of pregnancy for fetal abnormality, stillbirth, neonatal death, and SUDI, or sudden unexpected death of an infant. And it was funded by the Department of Health and Social Care and backed by an all-party parliamentary group on baby loss. So there's a lot been happening in the UK over the last 10 years. And the pathway project was led by SANS UK in close association with other charities. Now, the UK has a population of 68 million. So they were able, of course, they were able to do this because of 68 million. They've got that higher population, higher funding, but that's a lot of people. We've only got 5 million. We really feel like this is something we could achieve. And we offer this UK example as an example, not as a template, but as an example that we can look to and go, okay, here's an idea of what someone else has done.
And I guess we also bring it back to where we are in New Zealand Aotearoa. I think I mentioned, you know, the whānau pani model, and there are lots of really key Indigenous models that could be applied if we were looking at a standard bereavement care pathway. Hey, so I guess what we are laying down is a wero, is a challenge. We're acknowledging the fantastic work of our health professionals, so our individuals. Engari, we're also acknowledging that our system at the moment and how we set up is not, it's not optimal, really. It's not where we need it to be so that we can have that gentle journey in a club, really, that no parent ever wants to be part of. So as two bereaved mama of beautiful babies, the wero is out to you all and to the system to clear a path for standard care, actually to really value what is already out there in a volunteer sense, actually. So we have people, ourselves included, who are doing this mahi, and this mahi is important mahi and really needs to be supported properly and valued properly. And if we're going to do that, then we need to do it up and down the mutu. It needs to be co-led. We need to have an eye on our commitment to the treaty and Te Tiriti. So we take the frameworks and what has worked overseas and we bring it home and we talk to home and what works here in Aotearoa, New Zealand for us and our people. And we value that within the wider ecosystem for our families and whānau who don't ever want to be here. Nō reira, aira, tēnā koutou katoa. Vicky, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. And just want to acknowledge that we have a heavy reliance throughout Aotearoa New Zealand on non-profit voluntary organisations, one in particular, SANS New Zealand, and another smaller one, Baby Loss New Zealand. And like Lisa was saying, it's how much do we value this work and what's being done? And just because something's been around for a long time doesn't mean that we just expect it to continue. We need to actually put something in place where we say, this is important work and there is value in it, and we do something. And that something might look like, I've been thinking about this for a long time, so I've got some ideas about what it might look like. You know, there's some training for staff so they're confident and knowledgeable. There's really clear models, there's cultural safety in there. There's perhaps some minimum memory items like a memory book and hand and footprints. It's all up for consultation and kōrero with everyone throughout the country, but it feels doable. And like Lisa said, the wero is there to our government, to the people who are making those decisions, to step forward and acknowledge these whānau and acknowledge the experience that they're having, their precious pepe who have died.
Aida, and just finally, included in that wero, if we put this in place, if we do have a national bereavement pathway, bereavement care pathway, then as Vicky says, it is about training. It's actually about filling our cups and adding to our kite so that we can, I think I say this over and over because I know it and I feel it, we can make this journey for our whānau, for our families, the most gentle journey that it can be, couched in aroha, because actually that's where it's at. So the whole bereavement care pathway, the national bereavement care pathway, just couched in aroha for a community that no parent ever wants to be part of, but that we sometimes must. Aira. So we will assist in filling that cup and filling that kite with the knowledge, and we will wrap around our whānau and families with aroha. That is the wero, that is the tono, that is the request, that is the plea. Ai. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā rā koutou katoa. Kua mutu maua kōrero, so our kōrero has completed and finished, so we want to finish or close now with a karakia. Me karakia tātou. Unuhia, unuhia, unuhia ki te uru tapu nui, kia wātia, kia māma, te ngākau, te tinana, te wairua I te ara tangata. Ko ia rā I rongo, whakeiria ake ki runga, kia tīnā. Haumie huie, tai
Tahiki.
Kia ora
Kia ora.
rā.
Thank you, Vicky and Lisa, and thank you for the fantastic work and advocacy you do for bereaved parents. With regard to question and answer, we've run out of a wee bit of time. We've had a couple of offline questions which we will endeavour to answer offline. Thank you very much for all our speakers. This has been a different way of doing it, and in fact the whole report has been a different way of doing it. So we would be very interested in any feedback from the participants, and thank you to the participants for making the time to come to this webinar. And we really do hope that you take up the wero and the challenge. Thank you.
Kia ora tātou. Te mea tūtai kia mihi atu kia koutou ngā kai whakaata. Just want to acknowledge the presentators and all that really juicy information from a number of perspectives and angles. Really want to acknowledge all the participants, but especially like others, really want to acknowledge the whāia, the mothers, ngā tangata, ngā whare tangata, e ngā pepe, ngā taonga tuku iho mai I ngā atua. Especially those that we've lost. I'd like to just pull out a couple of things. I think it's fantastic that there has been a decrease in Pākehā mothers and babies being lost. It is, however, really unacceptable that there hasn't been a similar decrease for Māori, Pacifica, Indian and other minority groups. In terms of Māori, in terms of self-harm, mental health, and the other medical misadventures that were brought up, these are all linked across the system. The high suicide rate in Aotearoa, especially among young Māori women and young Māori men, the high use of the mental health systems across the country. So this is a real need for a whole system approach to this. There's been lots of wero or challenges put out by the various speakers and presenters. And maybe this is also one for ourselves at the Commission to look more holistically across the whole of the systems, across all of the committees, rather than continue to work it as a siloed approach. There have been a number of speakers that have spoken about tapu ingoa, have spoken about whare tangata, ngā pēpi taonga tuku iho, about te tiriti and about aroha. These are, especially in terms of whakapapa, is absolutely, or genealogy, is absolutely core to the Māori world. It's the way that we explain the world that we're in. That is why we have genealogical tables that exist from the omnipresent being or the beginning of all, right down to our present generation. This continued loss of our babies and our mothers can be seen from one perspective as a concerted continued attack upon te ao Māori and the core of who we are. Absolutely support Lisa with a focus on aroha and te tiriti. So just want to thank everybody that's been involved in this, and let's complete with karakia, because this work is tapu. We are dealing with people, and people are from the divine. Nō reira, me noi tātou, let's close with a karakia. Nō reira, kia tau, kia tātou katoa. Tia te whai o tō tātou ariki e Hukaraiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tapu. Ake, ake, amene. Kia ora tātou.